So it's Monday in the last week of the life of Jesus Christ. Hey, I'm Ike Reighard from Piedmont Church, and I want to welcome you back today on the second day as we talk about what was the last week like in the life of Jesus Christ. You know, it's amazing to me that 2/3 of the Gospel of John are dedicated to just the last week of Jesus Christ, and probably about 50% of the synoptic Gospels as well really revolve around that last week. And so there's so much wisdom and instruction that we can get as we study the Bible and we talk about what's happening in that last week and how does it apply to my life and what can our family really learn from it. So here's what was happening that last week. Passover was coming, that he was going to be celebrating inside the city of Jerusalem. And so on Sunday, the Passover Sunday, Jesus is going to come down off the Mount of Olives. If you were there and you were standing on the Mount of Olives, many of you have seen that beautiful picture that you look at the city of Jerusalem and you see that golden dome. And that golden dome is a Muslim church that's located, a mosque that's located there in the city of Jerusalem. And when you're looking at that angle and you're looking at the front of that mosque, you're standing on the Mount of Olives. In between it is going to be a valley that's running through there. And all through that valley, there's all kinds of cemeteries, actually leading up today, that go right up to the walls of the city of Jerusalem. There's all kinds of cemeteries that are there. People want to be buried in close proximity to the city of Jerusalem. But in the day of Christ, there was that valley that was running through there, and there was a creek that would have been making its way from the city of Jerusalem down the side of the hill. And so when Jesus is going to come down the Mount of Olives, there's a path there that's very well known as the path that Jesus would have traveled that day as he made his way down the side of the hill. Remember, I told you there were a couple of events that took place. Now, some people say that it took place on Sunday. Other people say that it took place on Monday, because on Palm Sunday, Jesus is going to go into the city of Jerusalem, but then he's going to leave and he's going to go back to the city of Bethany. That's about 1.5 miles outside the walls of Jerusalem, and he's going to stay there with Martha and Mary and Lazarus. So he's at their home. So the city is teeming with all these pilgrims. And so Jesus has walked then right back up the Mount of Olives over to the city of Bethany. And now on Monday, he's going to turn around and he's going to make his way back down that very same Mount of Olives. And he's going to cross the valley and he's going to walk up into the city of Jerusalem. Jerusalem is built on a series of hills. And so, it's a very mountainous place that he's going to be walking into. And when he goes in there that day, there's going to be this really key moment that's going to take place. For the second time in his ministry, he's going to go in and he's going to cleanse the temple. He was very upset about what was going on in that temple. And what was taking place was extortion. It had become a place of commerce, that is, the very temple itself. And so because of that, Jesus became irate, and he's going to flip over the tables of the money changers, and he's going to pick up some things, and he's going to begin to swing them around. And you just don't think of Jesus as being angry. And I think you can think of this more as righteous indignation. And he's upset over the things that he sees that's taking place inside of the temple. Part of the extortion would come because there were all these pilgrims that would travel all of these miles to get to the city of Jerusalem. And the priest had a system set up. And this system that they had set up, that they would be the ones who would inspect the different animals, livestock, fowl that were going to be sacrificed, and their blood was going to be poured on the altar. As a matter of fact, there are historians who say that when Jesus would have passed down the Mount of Olives those 2 times with everything that was going on in the city leading up to Passover, that the little brook running down through from the city of Jerusalem down through that valley, that brook would have been bloody in color because there were so many animals that were being sacrificed. Remember, the Bible says, apart from the shedding of blood, there is no remission of sin. And so in the Old Testament laws, there were the sacrificial systems that were taking place. But the priest had come along and they had decided to make it a moneymaker for them. And so they were charging exorbitant fees for the different animals that would be sacrificed. And these animals had to be without blemish. These were the animals that were going to be sacrificed then that would be a part of the Passover supper that Jesus and the disciples would participate in on Thursday night. So when he comes into the temple and he sees the corruption, when he comes in there and he sees it set up more like a bazaar than a church, that's when he begins to flip things over and he looks at people and he says, "What have you done to my Father's house? You know, you've turned it into a den of thieves is what you've done. And instead of it being a house of prayer." And so Jesus gives us an illustration on this week that we celebrate Love Does by showing us that one of the ways that we show God that we love Him is that we make His house a house of prayer and not a den of thieves. In other words, the church ought to be a place where people can come and experience the presence of Jesus Christ and never feel compelled that they've got to pay a certain price or they've got to look a certain way in order to be able to come into God's house and to be able to meet God in His presence. So on this week that we celebrate together the Passion of Jesus Christ, Monday, the day that He comes down the Mount of Olives and He goes in and He begins to clean up the temple and the city of Jerusalem.